I didn't think much of the first one. It was just a pinwheel stuck in the grass near the edge of my yard, spinning slowly in the wind like some harmless decoration. The kind of thing a kid might forget after a birthday party, or a neighbor might put up for decoration. It was red, bright enough to stand out against the dull green lawn, but not enough to feel wrong. At least, not at first. I told myself I'd remove it later. I didn't. Life has a way of making small things feel optional when nothing seems urgent. Work emails, dishes, sleep, the usual excuses. By the next morning, it was gone. I remember noticing that absence more than I noticed its presence. I stood at the window longer than I should have, trying to convince myself I had misremembered it being there at all. That's when I saw the second one. Blue this time, a few feet closer to the house, still spinning. I walked outside immediately. I don't know why. Curiosity maybe, or that annoying part of your brain that insists everything has a logical explanation if you just get close enough to inspect it. But when I reached the spot, it was already gone. No stick, no hole, no trace. Just flattened grass, like something had been pressed into it. I told myself it was wind, or birds, or anything that didn't involve thought. That night, I locked my doors early. The next morning, there were 3. Red, blue, white. They formed a loose line, pointing toward my front door. I didn't touch them this time. I just watched from behind the curtain, feeling something I couldn't explain settle in my stomach. Not fear exactly, not yet. More like recognition, like my brain had seen a pattern before I had. And patterns are dangerous when you don't understand what they mean. I started checking every morning after that. 4 pinwheels, 5, then 7. They stopped appearing randomly. They started forming structure, angles, arcs, curves that didn't belong to natural placement. Someone was arranging them with intent. But there was never anyone there. No footsteps, no tire marks, no cameras catching movement at night. Just the aftermath. And always that same detail. They were always spinning, even on windless mornings. That should have been impossible. I stopped sleeping properly after the 10th one appeared. That's when the notes started. Small pieces of paper tucked under the sticks. No handwriting, just printed text, like it came from a machine that didn't care about identity. You are close now. I laughed when I first read it. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was worse. Because if I didn't laugh, I would have had to accept that someone was doing this deliberately. And I didn't want to live in that version of reality. I took one of the pinwheels and threw it in the trash. It was back the next morning. Same spot, same color, same rotation. Only now it had a new note. Removal is part of it. That was the moment I stopped calling it harmless. I tried talking to my neighbor after that, just casually, like I hadn't been slowly losing my mind for days. He didn't have any pinwheels in his yard. Neither did anyone else on the street. Just me. Always me. He looked at me like I was tired when I mentioned it. Probably kids, he said, or some weird art thing. I nodded like that made sense, but it didn't. Because kids don't place things in identical spacing overnight without being seen. And art doesn't follow you closer to your house every day. That night, I stayed up waiting. Around 3:10 a.m., I heard something outside, not footsteps, a soft clicking noise, like plastic turning in air. I looked out the window and saw them. Dozens. Not scattered this time, not random. They were arranged in a spiral that started at the edge of my yard and wound inward toward the house. Each pinwheel spinning in perfect synchronization, like they were all part of the same machine. And in the center of that spiral, something new had appeared. A clock. Old, mechanical, ticking loudly, enough that I could hear it through the glass. It wasn't there the day before. I know it wasn't. I watched it for a long time, waiting for it to make sense. Then my front doorbell rang. Once. I didn't move. It rang again. Twice. I stepped back without realizing it, and then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single message. Don't break the circle. I didn't answer the door. I didn't go outside. I stayed in my room until morning, listening to the soft spinning outside, like something breathing. When daylight came, everything was gone. All of it, except the clock. It was on my porch now. Closer. Always closer. That's when I started noticing something else. Time felt wrong. Not dramatically, not like a movie. Just small inconsistencies. Clocks drifting minutes ahead, then behind. Then resetting entirely. My phone showing times I didn't recognize. And the worst part was the pinwheels were no longer just outside. I started seeing them reflected in windows that shouldn't have had anything behind me. Even when I turned around, nothing was there. But I still saw them, spinning, waiting. I stopped going outside completely after that. I told myself I was safe indoors. That was my mistake. Because the next note wasn't delivered. It was already inside, folded neatly on my kitchen counter like it had always been there. You are the center now. And underneath it, a simple diagram. My house, drawn as a pinwheel. That's when I finally understood. It wasn't random. It was a system. And I was the axis. The following night, everything changed. The spinning outside got louder. Not physically louder, more like it was in my head now, like the sound had stopped being sound and started becoming thought. I couldn't tell where it was coming from anymore. I opened my door without thinking, and the yard was full. Every inch of it. Pinwheels, clocks, shapes I couldn't name anymore. All rotating in impossible synchronization. Like reality itself had been wound too tight and was finally starting to give. And in the center of it all, standing perfectly still, was someone. I couldn't see their face. They didn't move. They didn't need to, because the message wasn't coming from them anymore. It was coming from everything. And I finally understood what the pinwheels meant. Not decoration, not warning, not art. Transformation. Not of the world, of me. The last thing I remember is stepping forward. Not because I wanted to, because I had already started moving before I realized I was. And the spinning didn't stop. I thought it was over. That's what my mind tried to convince me of the next morning. The yard was empty again. No pinwheels, no clock, no spiral patterns. Just normal grass swaying in the wind, like nothing had ever happened. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have called it a stress dream. But my phone was still on the table, and the message was still there. You are the center now. I deleted it immediately. Then I deleted the entire thread. Then I turned my phone off, like that would somehow erase the memory of it. It didn't, because now I was noticing things I hadn't before. My house felt aligned differently. Not physically, not obviously. Just enough that every hallway seemed slightly too long when I walked through it. Every room felt like it was angled towards something I couldn't see. Even my footsteps sounded off, like they were echoing back a fraction of a second too late. I tried leaving the house that day. The moment I opened the front door, I froze. There was a pinwheel on the doorstep. Green this time. Spinning already. Not placed. Waiting. I didn't step outside. I just stared at it. Until my body started feeling wrong. Like standing too long in one position was becoming harder than it should have been. Then, my neighbor's dog barked. Except it didn't sound like it came from my neighbor's yard. It sounded like it came from behind me. I turned instantly. Nothing. But the pinwheel had changed position. It was now angled toward the inside of my house, like it had noticed me noticing it. I shut the door fast and locked it. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because around noon, the knocking started again. Not loud, careful. like whoever was outside already knew I was listening. I didn't answer. The knocking stopped. Then came the mail slot. Something slid through. I waited a full minute before moving. When I finally picked it up, it was another note. This one longer. Not all centers are stable. Some resist rotation. Some break the pattern. You are doing both. I felt my hands go cold. Because that wasn't just observation. That was evaluation. Like I wasn't being stalked. I was being measured. That night I didn't sleep at all. I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, watching every reflection in every surface. Every shadow felt slightly delayed, like it was reacting to things after they happened. At around 2:47 a.m., the electricity flickered. Once, twice, then everything went quiet. Not dark, quiet. Even the hum of appliances disappeared. And that's when I noticed something outside the window. No pinwheels, just people. Standing at the edge of my yard. Not moving, not speaking. They weren't close enough to see clearly, but I could tell there were at least a dozen of them. All spaced evenly apart, like markers on a dial. And slowly, one of them raised their arm. Not waving, pointing. Toward my house, toward me. And then all of them started spinning in place. Not physically, like something inside them had clicked into motion. And at the exact same time, every clock in my house started ticking again. Loud, fast, out of sync. I backed away from the window, but I couldn't stop watching the reflection in the glass. Because behind me, in the reflection, the pinwheels were back. I didn't sleep again after that. Not because I was trying to stay awake, because something in my body wouldn't let me. It felt like every time I closed my eyes, I was missing something important happening outside them. Like reality itself was continuing without me, and if I wasn't watching, I'd come back to find I'd already been replaced. The next morning, there was no sunrise, or at least not the kind I was used to. The light came in uneven, like someone had stretched the sky too thin in certain places. My kitchen looked normal, but the shadows didn't match the furniture anymore. Everything felt slightly rotated. Not moved, rotated. I didn't go outside. I didn't need to, because the pinwheel was already inside the house again. This time, it was on the kitchen table. Red, spinning slowly. And underneath it was something new. A photograph. It was my house, taken from above, from an angle that shouldn't have been possible without a drone or a helicopter, or something I would have noticed. And in the yard of the photo, I was standing outside, looking up at the camera. Except I don't remember ever taking that picture. I dropped it immediately. It didn't fall like paper should. It fell like it had weight, like it was real. And when I picked it back up, the image had changed. Now I wasn't outside anymore. Now I was inside the house, looking directly at the table, at the pinwheel, at myself. I stumbled back so fast I hit the counter. My first instinct was simple. Burn it, destroy it, erase it. I grabbed the lighter from the drawer and held it over the photo, and it didn't burn. The flame bent around it, not metaphorically, physically, like the fire didn't want to touch it. That's when I heard the soft clicking again. Not outside, inside the walls, not moving through space, moving through structure. Like something inside the house was slowly aligning itself into a shape I wasn't supposed to understand yet. Then, the front door unlocked itself. I know how that sounds. I didn't press anything. Didn't hear anything. It just became unlocked and opened, slowly. Like it was waiting for permission it already assumed it had. I didn't move. I couldn't. Because standing in the doorway was one of them. Not a person exactly. Not fully. It looked like someone wearing the idea of a person incorrectly. Like the proportions were almost right, but slightly off in a way that made my eyes hurt if I focused too long. And behind it, I could see the yard again, covered, no longer with pinwheels, but with spirals drawn into the ground itself. Like the earth had been scratched into a diagram. The figure tilted its head, and for the first time, I heard it speak. Not through sound, through thought. You stop spinning outward. That is why we came inside. My mouth moved before I could stop it. Who are you? The answer wasn't immediate. It felt like the silence was being arranged before the response was allowed to exist. We are the maintenance. Things rot without rotation. You were not rotating correctly. That should have made no sense, but my brain filled in the gaps anyway, like it had been waiting to understand it the wrong way. I backed toward the hallway. The figure didn't follow. It didn't need to, because I finally noticed something worse. Every room I moved through was already slightly rotated from the last. Not physically shifting, but perception shifting. Like the house was slowly aligning itself around a new center. Me. I ran. Not out the door. Not yet. I ran deeper into the house because for some reason I thought distance mattered. Every mirror I passed showed something different. In one, I was standing still. In another, I was already on the ground. In another, I was surrounded. But none of them agreed on which version was real. And then I saw the clock, not the one from outside. One was embedded in my wall, ticking backward and forward at the same time. That's when I understood what transformation meant. It wasn't turning into something else. It was being repositioned into something that already existed somewhere else. A replacement in a structure I couldn't see. The house wasn't haunted. It was indexing me, cataloging me, aligning me. The spinning wasn't random. It was corrective. And I wasn't being chased anymore. I was being adjusted. I stopped running when I realized there was nowhere left in the house that wasn't already slightly wrong. Every room I entered felt like it had already been entered before me. Like I was walking through the memory of the house instead of the house itself. And the worst part was the silence. Not normal silence. Controlled silence. Like sound had been filtered out in certain places because it wasn't supposed to exist there anymore. Then I heard the spinning again. But it wasn't outside. It was under the floor. Slow at first, then faster. Like something beneath the house was answering the pattern above it. The walls started clicking in response. Not breaking, not cracking. Clicking, like mechanical alignment. I backed into the living room again, but it didn't feel like retreating. It felt like returning to a central point I kept trying to avoid. The figure was still in the doorway. It hadn't moved. It didn't need to, because now I understood something worse. It was never entering the house. The house had already expanded to include it. It was just the first part of it I could see clearly. The thought didn't come as words. It came as structure. Like my brain was being shown a diagram it didn't ask for, and I understood it immediately. The pinwheels weren't objects, they were instructions, and I had been following them without realizing it. Every time I noticed one, every time I reacted, every time I tried to remove one or avoid one, I was reinforcing the pattern. The system didn't need me to obey it. It only needed me to acknowledge it. And I had done that too many times, and this time, the message was clearer. Not resistance, recognition. You made yourself the center. I shook my head. No. I didn't do anything. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Because I remembered every moment. The first pinwheel. The second. The decision to look closer. The decision to engage. The decision to assign meaning. That was the trigger. Not the object. The interpretation. The pattern needed awareness to stabilize. And I had stabilized it. The spinning under the house slowed for a moment, like it was waiting for me to understand something else. Then it resumed. Faster. Closer. The floor beneath my feet began to feel uneven. Not physically shifting, but directionally uncertain, like gravity itself was negotiating. I looked at the front door again. It was still open, but I couldn't tell if it led outside anymore. Behind it, I could see the yard, still covered in spirals, still perfectly arranged. And now I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The spirals weren't random. They were expanding outward in measured increments, like ripples, like calibration waves. And I was the source point. The figure finally stepped forward, and as it did, I realized it wasn't walking. It was rotating into position. Every movement was a correction. Every pause was alignment. And then it stopped right in front of me. Close enough that I could see that its face wasn't empty. It was inconsistent. Different versions of a face trying to occupy the same space at once, and they kept slipping out of sync. It spoke again. Final position required. I shook my head again, harder this time. No, I'm leaving. But even as I turned, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. Because the moment I reached for the door, it wasn't there anymore. Just wall. Smooth. New. As if it had always been that way. The house had already rewritten itself around the center, around me. And then the spinning stopped. Not because it was over, because it had completed enough cycles to lock into place. Everything went still. For half a second, there was nothing. No sound. No motion. No thought. And then the clock inside the wall ticked once, very loudly. And the figure behind me said something that didn't feel like a voice anymore. It felt like confirmation. Center locked. I didn't move after that. Not because I was choosing not to. Because something in me stopped recognizing movement as something I could initiate. It felt like my thoughts were still happening, but they weren't connected to action anymore. Like I had been separated from the part of myself that turns intention into motion. The room stayed still, but it didn't feel empty. It felt complete, like every possible version of it had finally been accounted for. The figure didn't speak again. It didn't need to, because now I could feel what it meant without translation. The system wasn't watching me anymore. It had finished identifying me. That was worse. The walls of the house began to feel thinner. Not physically, but conceptually. Like the difference between inside and outside was becoming less meaningful with every passing second. And then I realized something I hadn't been able to accept before. The pinwheels were never markers. They were measurements. Each one wasn't a warning or a message. It was a data point, a correction attempt, a way of seeing how I reacted to being observed. And every reaction I had ever made had been recorded into the structure of the pattern itself. That's why it followed me. Not because it was hunting me, because it was refining the shape I was becoming. The thought should have terrified me. It didn't. It just felt final. The spinning started again, but not outside this time, not under the floor, inside me. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, in the way my perception organized reality. Every thought I had began to feel like it was rotating around a fixed point I couldn't access anymore. The center. Me. But not me as I understood it. Me as a function. A stabilized position in a system that no longer required input. The figure in front of me finally dissolved. Not disappearing, resolving. Like it was never separate from the structure it represented. And in its place, the room felt larger. Not expanded, reclassified. The walls stopped being boundaries and started being references. The floor stopped being support and became orientation. Even the air felt measured now. And somewhere far away, I could still hear a faint spinning. But I wasn't sure anymore if it was real, or just the memory of what motion used to feel like. My phone buzzed one last time on the table. I don't remember picking it up, but I remember seeing the message. No more outward motion required. Center function stable. And underneath it, a final line appeared. Welcome back to the pattern. That's when I understood the last part. There was no escape attempt left to make, because escape was just another form of rotation. And I had already stopped rotating outward a long time ago. Now, I only maintained position. I don't know how long I stood there. Time doesn't feel like it moves properly anymore. Sometimes I think it's still morning. Sometimes I think it never changed at all. Sometimes I hear something outside that sounds like wind catching plastic, and I almost remember what it felt like to be afraid of it. But the memory never fully forms. It just spins once, then settles, and I stay where I am, at the center. I thought it would end there, that things would go quiet again, that I would wake up the next morning and everything would feel like a bad dream I could slowly talk myself out of. But there is no morning anymore in the way I understand it. Only shifts. Small ones. Subtle enough that I only notice them when I try to remember what before felt like. Sometimes, I still check the yard. Not because I expect to see anything, but because the idea of not checking feels incomplete. The grass is always still now. Perfectly still. Like it's waiting for something that already arrived. And every so often, I hear it again. That faint clicking, that soft rotation. Not outside, not inside, just present. Like it's part of how the world holds itself together now. I don't talk to anyone anymore. Or maybe I do. It's hard to tell what counts as talking when responses don't feel separate from your thoughts. Sometimes I think I hear my name. Other times I think I'm the one saying it. I stop trying to distinguish the difference. The only thing I still know for certain is this. When I focus too long on stillness, I start to feel it again. That pull, that pressure toward a single point. A reminder that nothing is supposed to stay unaligned forever. And sometimes, only sometimes, I catch myself wondering if I was ever really the one experiencing any of this, or if I was just the part of the system that had to believe it was. But then that thought passes, and everything settles, back into position, back into pattern, back into center.